Happy Sunday, everybody. We did it. We did it. We crossed the 500 subscriber threshold. I still have to do a lot of more viewing hours, about 2,500 more viewing hours of you guys viewing the content. That's up to me to make more content that is interesting and helpful. So welcome everybody who is new. We are that much of the way through the Grimm Brothers fairy tales from 1812 and 1815. We are realizing how much we've been lied to, how much has been covered up. Also, if you're new here, it's becoming a zoo behind me. It's a part of what we do here. Love animals and love truth. All God's creatures, great and small. We have Lola the dog, Charlie the cat. Today, the fairy tale we have is called The Worn Out Dancing Shoes. Now, when we started all this fairy tale reading, not knowing the rabbit hole we were going down, and by we, I mean myself and the guys in the chat who I interact with every Sunday. I didn't know that 1930s book of Grimm Brothers fairy tale was way too woke. But anyway, back then, we read this one out of that book. I read the ones we've already read before anyway, because a lot of times they're so different, just with a tiny bit here. Like, oh, the existence of God. Everybody knew, everybody accepted that. But 1930s version, not so much already. So we may see other things. If I don't remember, one of the guys in the chat will. And the reason I'm making sure Lola gets plenty of screen time is because if I don't, I will never hear the end of it, particularly from Ken Lawson. He is going to demand there will be a riot. There will be a riot. So hopefully it won't be too distracting. The Worn Out Dancing Shoes. Once upon a time, there was a king who had 12 daughters, one more beautiful than the other. They slept together in a large room where their beds stood side by side, and in the evening, when they went to sleep, the king shut and locked the door. However, every morning, their shoes were worn out from dancing. And nobody knew where they had been and how it kept happening. So the king issued a proclamation that whoever could find out where his daughters danced during the night could choose one of them for his wife and be king after his death. But anyone who came and failed to uncover everything after 3 days and nights would lose his life. Not long after this proclamation, a prince came and was well received. In the evening, he was conducted to a room adjoining the bedchamber of the king's daughters. Notice, I was about to say, look, the man has to prove himself again, whatever, but he's proving himself to the father, which is a lot different than having to prove himself to the woman to then be her husband. That puts him at a starting point below her, beneath her up on a pedestal. The father can't figure out where his daughters are going to party. I mean, he did lock the door. He must know he better lock the door. They're still getting away with it. Okay, so he's getting ready to try to find out what's going on with these chicks. His bed was set up there, and he was told to watch and find out where they were dancing. And just to make sure they couldn't do anything in secret or go out anywhere else, the door of their room that led to his was kept open. However, the prince fell asleep, and when he awoke the next morning, all 12 of them had been to a dance, for their shoes were standing there with holes in the soles. The same thing happened the second and third nights, and his head was cut off. Okay. The fairy tales do not hold back. If you're new here, They don't hold back. They will get their point across no matter what they have to do. After that, there were many who came to try their luck, but they all left their lives behind them. Now, it so happened that a poor soldier who had been wounded and could no longer serve in the army traveled toward the city where the king lived. Along the way, he met an old woman who asked him where he was going. Okay, sorry. He met an old woman who asked him where he was going. Now, we are all very tuned in to look for witches. So anytime it's like there was an old woman, I'm like, because if she's not an old mother, she's not an old wife, she's an old woman. So you go, I'm suspicious. And we have good reason to be. And think about that. If you've been reading these fairy tales your whole life, and then you would have a good witchometer. We don't have good witchometers nowadays. And it shows. And I'm not talking about pointy hat, green skin, poof, cauldron. You can find them on TikTok. They're manifesting. It's a problem. So we're suspicious of this old woman now. She asked him where he was going. I really don't know myself, he said, but I'd certainly like to find out where the king's daughters go dancing and where they wear out their shoes so I could become king. Oh, that's not so difficult, said the old woman. Just don't drink the wine that's brought to you in the evening, and then pretend that you've fallen asleep. So they were drugging the guys. I had a feeling. These women. Think about it. Think about it for 1 second, especially if you're new here. Think about what you imagined, how you imagined women used to be, and what men used to think of women. If that's true, why are there so many themes in fairy tales that seem to warn against female nature? Wouldn't that have been helpful when you were a little boy to be like, yeah, you can't trust them, right? That's not the narrative that maybe the boys of today, but that's not the narrative the boomers grew up with, Gen X, whatever. You were taught sugar and spice and all things nice. You weren't taught beware and have a good witchometer also. Don't drink the wine and then pretend that you've fallen asleep. She also gave him a little cloak and added, when you put this cloak on, you'll be invisible and you'll be able to follow all 12 of them. After receiving such good advice, the soldier now became serious about the entire matter and plucked up his courage to present himself in front of the king as a suitor. He was welcomed just as cordially as the others had been and was given royal garments to put on. In the evening at bedtime, he was led to the antechamber and he was preparing to go to bed. And when he was preparing to go to bed, the oldest daughter brought him a beaker of wine. But he had tied a sponge underneath his chin and let the wine run into it and didn't drink a single drop. Then he lay down, and after lying there a little while, he began to snore as if he were in a deep, very deep sleep. When the princesses heard his snoring, they laughed, and the oldest said he too could have saved his life. God. Seriously, they know what's going to happen to these guys, and they just want to go dancing. Okay. He too could have saved his life. After this, they stood up, opened the closets, chests, and boxes, and took out splendid clothes. They groomed themselves in front of their mirrors and hurried about, eager to attend the dance. But the youngest said, I don't know. You're all happy, yet I have a strange feeling. I'm sure that something bad is going to happen to us. You're a silly goose, said the oldest. You're always afraid. Have you forgotten how many princes have already tried in vain? I didn't really need to give the soldier a sleeping potion, he'd never have awakened even without it. When they were all ready, they first took a look at the soldier, but he had shut his eyes tight, and since he neither moved nor stirred, they thought they were definitely safe. So the oldest went to her bed and knocked on it. Immediately it sank into the ground, and a trap door opened. The soldier watched them climb down through the opening, one after another, with the soldier in the lead. Since there was no time to lose, he got up, put on his little cloak, and climbed down after the youngest. Halfway down the stairs, he stepped on her dress slightly, causing her to become terrified and cry out, "Who's that? What's that? Who's holding my dress?" "Don't be so stupid," said the oldest. "You've just caught it on a hook." They went all the way down, and when they were at the bottom, they stood in the middle of a marvelous avenue of trees whose leaves were all made of silver and glittered and glimmered. "I'd better take a piece of evidence with me," the soldier thought, and broke off a branch, but the tree cracked and made tremendous sound. Again, the youngest cried out, "Something's wrong." "Didn't you hear the noise? That never happened before." But the oldest said, "That was just a burst of joy, because we'll soon be setting our princes free from the curse." We'll soon be setting our princes free from the curse. You guys can tell I cannot remember the story when we first read it. Okay. Then they came to another avenue of trees where all the leaves were made of gold, and finally to one where all the leaves were made of pure diamond. The soldier broke off branches from each kind, and each time there was a cracking sound that caused the younger sister to be terrified. But the oldest maintained that they were just bursts of joy. They went on and came to a large lake where there were 12 boats on it, and in each boat sat a handsome prince. They had been waiting for the 12 princesses, and each one took a princess in his boat, while the soldier went aboard with the youngest princess. Then her prince said, "I don't understand it, but the boat is much heavier today. I'll have to row with all my might to get it moving." "It's probably due to the warm weather," said the youngest. "I feel quite hot too." Okay. On the other side of the lake stood a beautiful, brightly lit palace, and sounds of merry music and drums and trumpets could be heard from it. They rowed over there, entered the palace, and each prince danced with his princess. The soldier danced invisibly as well. He's just over there dancing. Okay. The soldier danced invisibly as well, and whenever a princess went to drink a beaker of wine, he would drain it dry before it could reach her lips. The youngest sister was terribly anxious about this too, but the oldest continued to quiet her down. They danced until 3 a.m, when all the shoes were worn through, and they had to stop. The princes rowed them back across the lake, and this time the soldier sat in the first boat with the older sister. The princesses took leave of their princes on the bank and promised to return the following night. When they reached the stairs, the soldier ran ahead of them and got into bed. And by the time the 12 princesses came tripping slowly and wearily up the stairs, he was again snoring so loudly that they said, "Well, we certainly are safe from him." Then they took off their beautiful clothes, put them away, placed the worn-out shoes under their beds, and lay down to sleep. The next morning, the soldier decided not to say anything, but rather to follow and observe their strange life for the next 2 nights. Their strange life. Everything happened just as it had the first night. They danced each time until their shoes were worn out. However, the third time, he took a beaker with him for evidence. When the time came for him to give his answer, he took along the 3 branches and beaker and went before the king. The 12 princesses stood behind the door and listened to what he would say. When the king asked, "Where have my daughters spent the night wearing out their shoes?" He answered, "With 12 princes in an underground palace." Then he told him everything and produced the evidence. Immediately thereafter, the king summoned his daughters and asked them whether the soldier had told the truth. When they saw that they had been exposed and that denying would not help, they had to confess everything. Finally, the king asked the soldier which princess he would like for his wife. "I am no longer so young," he answered, "so I'll take the oldest." The wedding was held that same day, and the king promised to make him his successor to the kingdom after his death. The princes, however, I guess the ones on the boat underground, the princes, however, were compelled to remain under a curse for as many nights as they had danced with the princesses. Yeah, because you don't go dancing with princesses until you're married, right? I think dancing might have been a bit of a euphemism. What do you guys think? And I think he was like, "Nah, I'm old. I'll take the oldest." Really, what's the difference if all their dancing shoes are worn out? He was a broke old soldier. What do you guys think? What do you think that the dancing shoes represent? Because men don't want women with worn out dancing shoes. Now, you might go, "Wow, these grim fairy tales are awfully anti-woman." No, 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 no. If you're reading this to boys and girls, then the boys go, "Whoop, we don't want the ones with the worn out dancing shoes." You know what the girls learn? "I'm not going to go wear out my dancing shoes." That's degenerate. That's not good behavior. We don't have those things teaching our youth, right? This is so foreign. It just doesn't even seem like it could exist as hidden as it is, even in this society. But we used to know what bad behavior was. We used to know what the consequences are, the natural consequences. And it used to be in our stories, because stories shape our worldview. That's why we have literary archaeology, because you got to dig down to see what it is they're covering up. They never censored the Grimm brothers fairy tales. They never censored them. They just changed them over time. Disney recreated them, then recreated them again. It's no different. They don't censor the stuff they don't want you to see. They pile other stuff on top of it. They give you more bread and circus. So you'll ignore the truth. And you'll scoff at it. And be like, "Oh, silly, once upon a time, oh, a fairy tale." They changed what once upon a time and what a fairy tale even means. It doesn't mean, oh, that's just a fairy tale. As if fairy tales all have happy endings. They don't. They're way worse for some of these characters than we were ever told. And isn't it weird? People nowadays seem to not understand what consequences are, or that they even exist. I usually try to go about 30 minutes, so that means we're going to have another one. I had to skip ahead through some of the longer ones, which we will definitely circle back to get to the maiden from Brakel, Brakel. You guys will tell me how to pronounce that. Brakel, not sure. I'm going to say Brakel just because it seems phonetically accurate to my English brain. Okay. The maiden from Brakel. Once there was a maiden from Brakel who went to St. Anne's Chapel at the foot of the Hinnenberg. Since she wanted a husband and thought that nobody else was in the chapel, she sang. And I will spare you guys, I won't sing. Holy St. Anne, please help me get my man. Sorry. Holy St. Anne, please help me get my man. Oh, you know him, I'm sure. He lives down by the Sutmer gate. His hair is yellow and very pure. Oh, you know him well, I'm very sure. The sexton was standing behind the altar and heard her. So he called out in a shrill voice, "You won't get him! You won't get him!" The maiden thought that it was the child Mary, standing beside Mother Anne, who had spoken. Hence, the maiden became angry and replied, "Tra-la-la! You stupid brat! Hold your tongue and let your mother speak." I'm telling you, that was it. Okay. The short ones towards the end of the year they were published. Okay, let's get to the meat of it. She wanted a husband, so she went to pray for one. If you're not Catholic or Orthodox, let's just hold back and be like, okay, yeah, praying to Saint Anne, whatever. She said, hold on a second. The maiden thought that it was the child Mary standing beside Mother Anne who had spoken. Maiden thought that it was the child Mary standing beside, there's no punctuation there, beside Mother Anne who had spoken. Child Mary standing beside Mother Anne who had spoken. Hence, the maiden became angry and replied, tra-la-la. Well, that's how she shouldn't do that. That's how much women wanted husbands in the past, and they would go and pray. And even though you don't come away with, gosh, that's how it should be. That's the thing people don't understand about fairy tales. They're instructive, but they're instructive when read. Pardon me, little sore throat. Let me get a drink of water real quick. So sorry about that. I'm keeping it real here. It's instructional when you have a mother reading it to her children. So she would be like, it was correct to go and pray for your husband. However, the last thing you want to do is be nasty about it, because if you want a husband, it's not the best way to act like that. And perhaps that's why she doesn't have one to begin with. So if I was reading this to little girls, that's what I would say. And I would want the little boys to hear it. Like, maybe she's got such a bad attitude, and that's why she doesn't have a husband. Could be. Either way, this is an opportunity. Fairy tales provide the opportunity to teach the younger ones. Some of them are just instructional on their own, but many of them require the input of a mother. I say mother because we're the ones raising a children at that stage of their lives, shaping this beginning worldview. And you know what? Many of us never had that, not even a little bit of it. You know what? Even back in my day, sitting down watching Sesame Street sounds wholesome. I am sorry, but Big Bird and Snuffleupagus don't have anything on this. You could even say, well, gosh, the Count, that guy, that's kind of occulty. You know what I mean? I know I sound like the church lady from Saturday Night Live, but it's kind of occulty, right? It's normalizing the occult. You wouldn't realize that. You're like, it's just a puppet. Exactly. That's what you're supposed to think until it's not just a puppet, not just a puppet. And now it's completely normalized. And now witches are the good guys in some stories. Wonder how we got there. We got there because, it's just a puppet kind of a thing. Fairy tales are serious business. They're serious. What's more important than the tales outside of the Bible, but that carry the principles through? What's more important than those stories who shape the worldview that shapes the culture? Nothing. Nothing. Fairy tales are dead serious. That's what we've learned on this channel. All right, let me see what time we have. Oh, we've got more time. Yay! All right. Let's see. We've got one entitled The Domestic Servants. It's also short, not as short as the maiden from Brael. I don't know why. Charlie the cat. I guess now when I'm recording, it's like, it's showtime. He's the star. So I get to see what all he's been up to behind me when I watch this with you guys. Okay, The Domestic Servants. Where are you going? To Woolp. It's Woelpe. Don't know. Where are you going? To Woolp. I'm going to Woolp. You're going to Woolp. So let's go together. Do you also have a husband? What's his name? Chain. My husband's named Chain. Yours is Chain. I'm going to Woolp. You're going to Woolp. So then, let's go together. Do you also have a child? What's he called? Scab. My child's called Scab. Yours is Scab. My husband's Chain. Yours is Chain. I'm going to Woolp. You're going to Woolp. So then, let's go together. Do you also have a cradle? What's your cradle called? Hippodige. Hippodeige. Hippodige. My cradle's called Hippodige. Yours is Hippodige. My child's Scab. Yours is Scab. My husband's Chain. Yours is Chain. You're going to Woolp. I'm going to Woolp. So then, let's go together. Do you also have a servant? What's your servant called? Do it right. My servants do it right. Your servants do it right. My cradle's Hippodige. Yours is Hippodige. My child's Scab. Yours is Scab. What in the world? My husband's Chain. Yours is Chain. I'm going to Woolp. You're going to Woolp. So then let's go together. That's the end. Okay. Since I've been reading these fairy tales a while, I feel like sometimes they leave the ones at the end that require a little bit more. She's going somewhere, right? You guys tell me if I'm reading too much into this. They were very similar, obviously. Same servant, same child, same husband. I would say same culture, right? Because I don't think this one's so literal. It's just same. We have a problem right now in the West of some not same people moving into other nations, other countries. People who don't have the same values, who don't have the same anything hardly. And they're trying to say, the powers that be are trying to say diversity is our strength. Any religion, any language, any value system. As Tucker Carlson's been saying a lot recently, we in the West don't say, oh, you did a thing, or your grandparents did a thing, therefore I blame you. That is very cultural. It is very Eastern. It is not how we think of things now. However, if a lot of those not same people join us to wallop, well, it's not going to be a very good trip, is it? She was making sure, hey, let's just make sure we are the same. Like, do we have the same cultures, morals, values? Do we understand each other? Because otherwise, the journey is going to be a disaster. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe some of these fairy tales were written in such a way that you could, depending on how it fit with what the problem is. These fairy tales hold so much power in their truth telling. I think that there's no way that it can be about anything else except make sure the person or the people share the same values, morals, customs, everything that you share before you go about trying to accomplish anything. Even if accomplishing that thing means living peacefully in the same geographic location. So sometimes the ones that seem so just mundane and like, what? End up hitting in such a way that you go, no wonder they didn't want you to read this. They don't want you to read it. They don't want you to think about it. And at the end of the day, we're at a point in history where they don't want you to read it all, and they don't want you to think it all. They'll tell you what to think, and they'll show it to you. You don't need to read. So, please be looking for more content on this channel. I am going to start doing videos more frequently than just Sunday night. I will let everybody in the Far From Eden discourse, and somebody can drop a link to that, I think, in the chat, one of the mods, and I will put it on Far From Eden Locals and Far From Eden Facebook page when we are going to do another night of literary archaeology. There's so much out there, and I just feel like this urgency. There's an urgency in me to speak truth. I just feel like any truth needs to get out there, needs to reach people. And what were fairy tales for, if not for that? In fact, many stories going back hundreds of years, that's what it's for. That's why it's terrifying what movies, music, everything has done, because it's brainwashed us. We thought we were being entertained. So, anyways, if this is your first time here, you might start seeing the world a lot differently after this. Like when you're just going to go watch a movie, and I'm sorry I ruined it for you, but also you're welcome. Thank you guys for hanging out. I enjoy this so much each week. Feeds my soul. And that's what I want you guys to do. I want you to feed your souls. I want you to protect your peace. I love you guys. And I'll see you on the next one.